Hi, my name is Thomas Surprenant, makeup artist from Star Trek, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and two of the Star Trek films. And I'm here to talk about my career on Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. You may be surprised to hear this, but can you guess which episode of this series has been the most popular so far? Would you believe it's not any of the celebrity actors we've spoken to, it's actually Michael Moore, one of the prop makers for Star Trek. There are other episodes creeping up behind him in terms of popularity, but as of now, it's the man who crafted the phasers, tricorders, and other tech and objects you see in every episode and in a bunch of the Star Trek movies. There's a real thirst for behind-the-scenes info about Trek, the real deep, nitty-gritty kind of stuff, and that's why I'm very excited to have today's guest joining us. On this episode, we're speaking with Thomas E. Surprenant, who spent about 15 minutes with me after we recorded the episode, coaching me on how to say his last name. Despite all that coaching, I'm pretty sure I still bombed it, but hey, Thomas, thanks for trying. Thomas is a makeup artist, specifically working in special effects, but also having done some beauty work throughout his career, who's worked on Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and two of the Star Trek TNG films, Generations and First Contact. Thomas was part of the team led by Michael Westmore that won the Emmy in 1995 for the Deep Space Nine episode Distant Voices, and the same team was nominated again a year later for that beloved episode, The Visitor. He's one of the people responsible for giving faces to numerous aliens in the franchise, and today he tells us a little bit about working on Trek, as well as some of the other films and TV shows that he's been a part of. Now, much like that conversation I had with Michael Moore a few months back, I know practically nothing about makeup, and even less about special effects makeup. So if you're an inquiring mind like me who wants to know more about this field, you're about to get a really great education over the course of the next 90 minutes or so. So stick around, there's a lot of really great stories and a lot of good tips in this one. Before we jump into our interview, I want to remind everyone to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Trek Untold, and that's all one word, no spaces. You can also support this show by visiting patreon.com/TrekUntold. If you want to check out some of our merch and put Trek Untold on a shirt, hoodie, mug, sticker, or something else, head on over to teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold to proudly display how much you like this podcast. And if you do happen to get some Trek Untold merch, go ahead and tag us on social media and let us know you got it. We'd love to see it. But most of all, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast and to leave a rating and a review. There is a lot of Star Trek podcasts out there, as I'm sure you already know, and leaving ratings and reviews helps people find us when they're searching for these types of shows. If you're already following us or offering your support in whatever way you can, be it a follow, review, monetarily, or even just listening today, thank you for the help. There's a family of Star Trek podcasts out there, and we appreciate you joining us here each and every week on the show. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired products for toys and people. But you'll hear more about them a little bit later on in the show. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file.
Affirmative. Initiating program.
All right, and welcome back to Trek Untold. And now, joining me on the other side of the line, we've got a makeup artist who's been working for more than 3 decades. He has been nominated for 3 Emmys, and he's won twice, including for Star Trek. And he's also been part of 2 Academy Award-winning makeup crews. He's received Makeup Artists and Hairstylist Guild Awards. He's worked on so many movies and so many TV shows, from all the way back into the 90s to today. Today, we're speaking with Thomas Surprenant. Thomas, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm hoping I said your last name right still, because I was having problems before. I'm hoping I got it this time around.
It sounded good.
All right, we'll go with that. So thanks so much for joining us here today. You know, it's our first time speaking to anybody in the makeup department, and that's a department I don't really know much about. I don't really know much of how it functions within the rest of the production. So, I understand what it is, but how it works all the departments and all the little bits and pieces of how you guys work, that's something I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners are just as curious as I'm going to be today. So I really appreciate you coming on board to enlighten us on what it is a Star Trek makeup person does.
Okay, well, I have to give a shout out to my boss from the show, Michael Westmore. Mike is an Academy Award-winning makeup artist, countless Emmys. My granddad worked with him on Capricorn One. Anyway, he was our designer supervisor, and basically, he was the one who made sure everything fell into place, from the designs of the makeups and the characters, from beauty all the way to bizarre aliens, to hiring the appropriate people to do the appropriate things, and just try to keep everything running. And it was no easy task. I don't think people really understand the gravity of his position. When I came into the Trek world, it was the sixth season of Next Gen, I think, and the second season of DS9. So he had two shows he was designing. As things progressed, on this, when we were doing like the third season of DS9 and the seventh season and final season of Next Gen, we also ushered in the Next Gen movie Generations. So he was designing and supervising three shows, two television shows and a major motion picture. And it was the first motion picture of Star Trek with the new Next Generation crew. And he worked his butt off. I mean, I don't think people realize how hard that man worked.
Well, he's going to come up a lot today for sure, because I've got plenty of questions to ask about him, his involvement as well. He gets kind of lost in the mix, even though he was such a big part of what Star Trek is. I do think his name kind of is not always in the big conversations.
Yeah, and it should be, because, with everyone else, and their departments and stuff, everyone had a huge workload. It was a very big show to run weekly. The shooting schedules and everything had to be done and created, and I mean, we would be in the middle of an episode, and we'd also be working on aliens for the next episode, and sometimes we'd get a reprieve, and it would be like a light show, and it would be some background aliens or some Bajorans on DS9. It wasn't that bad, but yeah, I mean, there was a huge amount of people working on the show for heavy alien days. And we would have whole sound stages dedicated to makeup artists. And if it was a big, a big alien show on Voyager or Next Gen and DS9, we'd have two sound stages, plus the upstairs lab, as we called it, filled with makeup artists, doing aliens.
So we're going to talk a whole ton about that. But before we get into your time with Star Trek, I want to discuss what you did before you got there, because you've had quite a journey to get yourself to there. So I want to start this off by asking the same question we start all these interviews with, and that is, Thomas, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek?
My earliest memory of Star Trek, watching it in reruns when I was a small child. I mean, I hadn't, been to kindergarten yet, so 4 years old maybe, and just loving the show, and it, lying on the floor, in the house in Burbank, California, watching it on one of those old television sets, and it was like my weekly, treat. I loved watching it, and then, throughout my life, it's just been a huge part of my life. And it's one of the odd things about Star Trek was, when I was an early teen, this one teacher I had, I ended up moving to the Midwest because of family or whatever, and I was in the middle of nowhere, and this one teacher was like, I have a friend who's really into that Star Wars thing. Well, come to find out, it was Star Trek.
Yeah, big difference there.
Yeah. And so she introduced me to this fellow teacher friend of hers, Phyllis Sutter, and she would have like viewing parties and stuff, and she had two kids my age, and we'd all hang out and have like barbecue and whatever, and watch Star Trek, and she had them all on VHS, and this was like early 80s, and she ended up getting involved with the Star Trek convention circuit and kind of managing appearances for DeForest Kelley and James Doohan, and I got to meet them. And Susan Sackett, and the original, cast, and it was really amazing. Back then I was inspired. I wanted to do makeup, so I did like a Klingon forehead. Like built a costume. This was before the term cosplay, and entered a costume contest, and yeah, it was great. Kind of having a little in to that world of Star Trek and meeting Star Trek actors.
Now, I'm just curious, how old were you about when you made that first makeup of the Klingon, and what did you do to make it?
Oh God. Let's see. I was 14, maybe ish, 14. And possibly 15, but no, I think I was 14. Yeah, I was 14, and I sculpted it. Now this is Star Trek motion picture Klingon, so it was really that pronounced spine that went down the nose, and so I built, sculpted it. I did a plaster Paris mold and poured it up in latex, just regular mask making latex, and attached it to a bald cap. And my hair was longer then, that was kind of the trend back then. And so I took crepe wool and, glued it down with like rubber cement and, painted it all up, and then, applied it to myself and glued it down with spirit gum and added eyebrows and painted my teeth yellow, with the tooth enamels. And yeah, I think I came in like third place or something, and yeah, it was really cool.
So as a 14-year-old, I would have understood none of what you just said. How did you learn all these things?
Well, most of my family has worked in the film industry, my immediate family, I should say. And um, I right around that time, I saw An American Werewolf in London, and that really was like, okay, I want to do. And I watched anything and read anything about, special makeup effects. And I started making phone calls. My grandfather introduced me to people. And the Westmores were like a household name because my granddad worked with a lot of them, like Frank Westmore and Wally Westmore, and that was the old studio days when like certain things would cross over into other departments. So like my grandfather worked in the paint department, and so anytime like people needed like to be basically airbrushed, like air gun, like painted bodies and stuff. That was something the paint department would come into under the supervision of the makeup department. And anyway, so I got introduced to a lot of people, and they were like, well, go here and buy this, and just kind of, I just kind of figured it out from instructions and that were given to me verbally, and there wasn't a lot of good information back then, but I absorbed what I could, and there was a couple good books actually, and so I kind of got an idea of what I was doing. And an uncle of mine actually was worked in something called the staff shop, and they did molds, and so he taught me how to do molds and things like that. So that was kind of like, luckily I had that family kind of thing going on.
Yeah. Now, what did your parents do since they were working in the industry as well?
My mother had a wig shop, and she was a wig maker, and she did wigs. And my father wasn't in the industry, and I lost him early in my life, so that was like one of those things. So I really didn't get to know him. But my like I said, my grandfather was a huge influence. Just because he'd been in for so long, and it was just part of the family. Like, yeah, it was really odd. the whole like being starstruck and all that, it just wasn't a thing because it was just what your family did.
Mm.
And back in the day, now I sound like an old man, but back in the day, growing up in Burbank in like the late 60s and early 70s, everybody knew everybody. It was a very small town considering it was a big town, and back then people either worked in the film industry, at a local shop, or at Lockheed. And so like when you went to school, like, half of your friends, their family, worked in accounting for the studios, or they were stunt people in the film industry or whatever. It was just kind of commonplace back then.
So where did you go to then pursue this as your full-time living? Did you go to school to learn more about this?
Well, once again, there wasn't a lot that back then, and there wasn't a lot that I knew of back then. Like, and so I just kind of taught myself mostly. I would talk to different people, in the industry, and they would tell me, this is a product here, and this is a product there, and this is used for that, and I used to make phone calls, it's pre-internet. And way pre-internet, and I remember calling Charlie Schram, who had a company called Windsor Hill, and Charlie Schram worked on the Wizard of Oz. He was one of the granddaddies of makeup, and he sold foam latex, and I bought a foam latex kit from him, and also like the different chemical companies. Like there was a company called R&D Latex, and they were really helpful. You could call them and they would get a tech person on with you, and they would walk you through stuff and give you suggestions and ideas. And then like there was one beauty supply ran by this fellow by the name of Namey, and it was Friends Beauty Supply, and it was on the corner of Magnolia and Laurel Canyon. And it was a tiny little place, but Namey knew everything and everybody. And he, I would go in and, buy latex or whatever, and he's like, here's this product here. And he would give me like a sample kit of something. And he's like, try this out. So, yeah, I just I started making a logbook of all the different companies and talking to their tech people, and it was really helpful, and it was really accessible back then, which is odd. I mean, it was just I think it was just being personal and speaking to a person instead of just an email.
Yeah, you're doing this all on your own. You're basically writing your own Bible, if you will, to how to do this kind of stuff. How did you get your first professional gig doing this?
Oh gosh. Well, I had this friend who has since passed away, Tony Ruprecht, and Tony had so much faith in me. He wasn't much older than me, just a few years older, but he was already working, and he did a lot of. He was kind of known for his mechanical effects and stuff, and he was just super. I mean, he was really well-rounded. He was great at everything he did, and he let me know about this job in like opening, and like set me up for an interview, and I went and interviewed with Kenny Myers for Return of the Living Dead 2, and I went up and with a buddy who interviewed as well, and I got the job, and it was all lab work, and I learned so much in the few weeks that I worked on that. I mean, stuff that I didn't really know, like like some really cool techniques, and that was my first professional gig.
Now, were you purely doing like special effects makeup, or were you doing also kind of, I guess, beauty makeup as well?
Well, on the side, I was doing beauty makeup. There was this one, and it really bothers me. I can't remember his name, but the department head for Universal Studios way back when they had a legitimate like makeup department, and it was still like the studio system. And really nice fellow, and he always took time to show me things and talk to me about makeup, and he told me to learn everything I can, like learn hair, learn this, learn that. And he said, honestly, because I was like, oh, Rick Baker, like so many kids who were into this were
Right.
at that time, and he's like, well, the reality is, you need to know everything. You need to know beauty makeup, historical makeup. You need to know how to make beards and lay beards and mustaches and because that's going to be your bread and butter. Rick Baker, is a phenomenon. It's not everyone can, just make monsters and stuff. Your career is going to be more than monsters. And I took that to heart. Also, a friend of my grandfather was a gentleman by the name of Chris Mueller Jr. He sculpted all the original stuff for the Disney theme parks, like the Pirates and stuff like that. He was the chief in charge of all that. And he also sculpted the creature from the Black Lagoon costume.
Oh, wow.
So he was actually, prior to the film industry, like a legitimate, like formal artist and sculptor. And he kind of put me straight on some stuff. I brought some stuff in to show him, and he was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is a mummy, and this is this monster, and whatever." And he's like, "It's ugly." And I was like, "Whoa," and he was that old timey, like grumpy, grouchy, but it sunk in. He's like, I the next time I, see any of your work, I want to see you sculpt like a man's face, like a bust, or a woman, or a child. Better yet, sculpt a baby. And I'm like, whoa. And he's like, we all know what they look like, and if you can make it look real, then you've accomplished what you've set out to do as a sculptor. It's like, and then he explained that it will help me make believable monsters. It's like you could just sculpt anything and call it a monster and throw blood on it, but the more you know about anatomy and the way everything works, like all the different structures underneath flesh and things like that, it's just the mechanics of movement and things. It really kind of like, those couple comments really, sunk in and hit home. And I was like, okay. So I did go to cosmetology school because one gentleman said, learn everything, and so I thought maybe the cosmetology school would be a good thing. And it did. It taught me about skin. It taught me about skin care. It taught me about hygiene for skin and for yourself as a professional, and which, that leads into another story of, some makeup people I've seen who know nothing about like kit sanitation and like that procedure right there, especially in the day and age we're living in right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's very important not to contaminate your makeup, and it just, so that gave me a really good foundation on, how to present myself and how to go about, setting things up and all that.
Just hearing about your beginnings and this early part of your career, it's really a testament to the power of saying yes to things, because you're doing all these cold calls, and these folks you call, they could have just said, no, go away, kid, you bother me, but they actually took the time to really teach you things and give you so much information, and that's just really amazing. I feel like that's something you don't really hear about as much today.
Yeah, it was a really friendly atmosphere. I wrote an article a while ago for Neil Gorton, who's a dear friend of mine in the UK, who did Doctor Who and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, the guy's amazing. His career goes way back as well. But he asked me to write this article, and it was basically about, what we're talking about now, like kind of the roots of things, and like, like the 80s. It was a huge time for effects makeup. And I mean, we were all really young and experimenting and dealing directly with chemical companies that made urethanes and elastomers and foams and all sorts of, magical, like magical, like concoctions. And the funny thing is, like, now you can just go and buy this stuff. There are shops designated, just for effects makeup, and Oh gosh, there's a ton of different places. Effects Warehouse in Philadelphia, Motion Picture Effects Company. Most beauty supplies, big Hollywood beauty supplies, have an effects division where you could go in and say, I need foam latex, I need an 8-pound polyurethane foam, and some epoxy or whatever, and they have it. And before then, it was like, there was one wonderful lady, Sandra Berman, who had a shop, and she was the first to introduce effects materials back in the 80s, to the public.
So at this point now, I want to jump into a little bit of your early career before we get to Trek, talk about some things you did before Trek, a few things you did after Trek, and I want to start things off with one of the things that I like the most that you did that I can, off the top of my head, recognize, and that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer from 1992. So what did you do
Oh,
on Buffy?
wow. That was, oh God, that was a really, it's weird that you'd bring it up. What is it now? The 30th anniversary,
Just
or
about. I mean, yeah, it's just about close to 30th, right? I'm bad at math, but it sounds about right to
yeah,
me.
yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I just watched it last week. I haven't watched it in a while, and people were posting a bunch of stuff about it recently on social media, and I thought, oh, why not revisit? And boy, I didn't realize it was going to make me so emotional. We lost so many wonderful people from that film, and it just, wow, and it brought back so many good memories too, and like, we had so much fun, considering the amount of work that went into it and how many nights we shot. I got a call from a friend of mine, Michelle Bueller, who, I have to give, props to, because she always had faith in me too. She was one of the people who early on in my career, um, just liked my skills, liked me as a person, and wanted to work with me, and kept me working. And I really appreciate that. She was an amazing lady to work with. I haven't worked with her in forever, but I think the last thing was It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But anyway, I got a call from her to come in, and I'm like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like everyone, back
Oh yeah.
then, like, you heard that, you're like, what the hell, and I had the same reaction to another film many years later. I got a call from Drew Barrymore about Donnie Darko, and I'm like, Donnie Darko. And anyway, so Buffy, I go, and my first night was just kind of like hanging out, and it was the graveyard scene where Buffy, first gets her cramps, and the two vampires come up from their graves and attack her. And it was kind of a big deal because Donald Sutherland's there, and it's like he has his own personal makeup artist, and it's Donald Sutherland, for goodness sakes, and anyway. And I met Christy, who was just a doll. I mean, she was totally just such a personality, and it was, yeah, it was a really slow night. It was basically vampires and things. Just it was
Things
minimal
that go bump in
cast
the night.
anyway. Yeah, and we had pizza. uh it
Pizza
was
and
just,
vampires, Hollywood.
yeah, it was, yeah. Michelle's ex-husband brought like some pizzas from this really nice Italian restaurant. Anyway, so we were sitting like in Griffith Park, with this cemetery set built outside, and at night eating pizza with vampires. But yeah, it's crazy. And then it just, that show, we shot so much footage. I want to put this out there, so if anyone hears this, and I put this out there before, hopefully somebody gets on it. But we shot so much footage, like, it would have been a darker movie and a little more intense movie. There was a ton of dream sequences where Buffy meets Lothos, Richter Hauer, and it, it just, there was so much more meat, so to speak, and they edited all that out, and it's sad because I think the Buffy fans, the diehard fans, would love to see that. And yeah, it was so much fun. Like, we would also cook. Um, it was a different time, but like we would cook in either Rutger's trailer or Paul Rubens' trailer. I mean, we had a caterer. I mean, it was a feature film, but like Michelle was like, "Ugh, the catered food," and she's part French and lived in France for a while, and so she was very particular about things. And most everyone was like, "Ugh, catered food." Anyway, so so different people would take turns cooking, and I remember like bringing stuff in, and we'd be sitting around in the actors trailer, like Tony Basil was there, and like Richter and Richter's assistant and Paul, and it would just be all sitting around with the makeup crew. It's very intimate, and sometimes somebody from wardrobe would be there, and we'd have a bottle of wine, and we'd all have like a glass of wine with dinner. It was very urbane, and the nights were long. I mean, we would start before sunset, getting everyone in makeup, and then we would shoot all night until sunup, and it was like and you felt like a vampire, there was just so many funny little things that happened on the show. Oh my gosh, I mean that this would be a completely you know uh, like a 3-hour interview just on Buffy. I mean the amount of stuff that happened on that show, and yeah, it was so much fun. And the last week of shooting was 7 days. We shot 7 days straight. And we were all making really good money because of overtime and things.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I think it was the last day, or the second of the last day. No, it was the last day. I ended up, we were down in Santa Monica, and I ended up calling the Broadway Deli, I think it was, and I ordered like all the champagne and caviar and like creme fraiche and bread and different things, and like nibbly things, like just a bunch of plates of nibbly things and olives and whatnot. Anyway, and I set up in this one room at the stage, and it was kind of like a little thing. Come by, grab some champagne. It was like my thank you. It was my big like true gift or whatever. And it was like that. Like there was these Letterman jackets from the movie, and Rutger Hauer bought the entire crew a Letterman's jacket, and it was
wow.
I still have mine. It's purple and like cream, and with like a red satin lining. And
now you gotta put a picture of that up on Instagram so we can all see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was it meant so much. And then like Luke Perry, like the first night I met Luke, I didn't realize who he was. I mean, I never watched 90210, but I'm a sci-fi horror person.
Yeah,
I'm like,
same here.
So I didn't know who he was, and I thought he actually was one of the stuntmen, and he said something kind of snarky, and I said something back to him kind of snarky, and we won't get into it, but I was just like, oh, you smart ass, and anyway, so when he left the trailer, our hairstylist Barbara, she's like, oh my God, do you know who that was? And I'm like, I don't know, one of the stunt guys. And she's like, oh, that's Luke Perry. He's like our lead actor. And I'm like, oh. And she's like, I think maybe you should apologize to him or like, clear up. Like, and I'm like, oh dear. Well, later on that night, I'm touching Luke up, and, we're waiting out rain because it was pouring down. We had like this crazy, bout of rain while we were shooting, and so we're at Disney Ranch, and we're under like a tent waiting for the rain to stop. And I kind of pulled Luke off to the side and said, hey, I hope I didn't insult you, whatever, blah blah blah. And he goes, you really didn't know who I was? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, that's cool. And then after that, like him and I were buds, and like it was weird because like we kept missing each other on different shows, and I would have makeup people randomly go, Luke says to say hi, and I'm like, oh my God, this many years later, and it's just such a shame we lost him, because there was no one nicer, no one kinder, no one more professional. I mean, he was just absolutely the best guy you could ever work with.
Now, you mentioned before you also worked on Donnie Darko. I'm curious what you did
Yes.
for that movie.
Frank the Bunny's makeup.
Ah,
When he takes off his bunny head, I'm the guy who shot his eye out.
okay. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about that too, because I know like a lot of what you have done is horror films in particular. So I'm curious, how often you're called in to make a monster type character or an alien character versus just doing like what you did on Donnie Darko, making a person look like they're dead or mangled up.
Oh gosh. Well, well, the fun. Okay, let's bounce back to Buffy. When I got hired, I didn't get hired to do effects makeup on it, even though I ended up doing effects makeup. I did Hilary Swank's makeup and Paris Vaughn and Michelle Abrams' makeup, Buffy's friends, and the random guy, Ben Affleck. I had to make him look sweaty when he was playing basketball. It's like, except his nose. His nose had to be powdered, but everything else had to be sweaty. Movie sweat. Anyway, but most of my career actually, honestly, has been beauty makeup, but it seems like I've done more effects makeup. But then again, I don't know. Maybe it's half and half. But I most of the jobs that I've got hired for, it seems like have been like kind of boring beauty, except like on Star Trek, where I did, prosthetics and sideburns and, like some female aliens that needed to look beautiful and alien. But it's, I guess it's about 50-50. But um, the how I got Donnie Darko was I knew Drew Barrymore, and she called me and asked if I had help out on this little film she was doing, and I'm like, yeah, sure. And she told me what was required, and I was like, yeah, that's easy. So tied an eyebrow and sculpted a prosthetic and molded it and ran it and made my way to Santa Monica where they were shooting for the reveal scene, and and then I met this wonderful actor by the name of James Duval, and since then Jimmy and I have become really good friends, and he's once again one of the nicest people you'd ever want to work with, and just a joy to work with, and funny as hell. We actually had to walk from the makeup trailer up I forgot Montana Avenue or whatever in Santa Monica to the movie theater where we were filming at, and there was these two older women who were walking and kind of talking to themselves, and here's Jimmy and I walking up, and he's in his bunny costume holding his bunny head with his eye shot out, and the two ladies look up and see him, and they like quickly divert their stare and like hurried past us, and I was like, okay.
I think that's a compliment to your makeup job, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was one of those things where at first, like I said, the title of the movie kind of was goofy and stuff, but after just being on set and being around everything and like getting what's going on, I was like, well, this is something I really hope like people watch this, and then when I finally did get to see it, it was one of those films where I look back and I'm like, God, thank God I was a part of this, because this film has so much heart, so much love, and there's such a deep story there, and it's really good, and Jake's first movie and stuff like that. It was just, yeah, I mean, everybody was so wonderful, and it was just amazing.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
If you find yourself listening to your favorite podcast and wondering what microphone they use or how they do their editing, or if you watch a YouTube video and you wonder what camera is that, or going one step further, if you're watching Twitch and you're wondering how your favorite Twitch streamer built their rig and if you can do the same, then Toys and Tech of the Trade is for you. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with content creators, entrepreneurs, and discuss the gadgets and gear that they use to create their content and run their businesses. We use toys in a broad sense, meaning the stuff that just puts a smile on your face, whether it's action figures to something a little bit more complex like musical instruments, cars. You'd be surprised what people consider their toys. Toys and Tech of the Trade can be found on all major podcast providers, including iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and of course, Spotify. Feel free to visit us at RageWorksNetwork.com to check us out.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So Thomas, let's go ahead and start talking some Trek now. How did you end up working on Star Trek Next Generation?
Okay. Well, because of Buffy, I got in the union, and I just paid my dues, and I was in, and so I was in between, living in LA and living out where I live now, in the middle of nowhere, and I was on my way home, and I was a good, hour outside of LA, and I got a page. And, once again, kids now don't know what pagers are.
Yes, pagers.
Yes.
Pagers and beepers.
They were like the worst thing on the planet. And it was like literally having a dog collar on or something. I pulled off and there was like, this shop, and they had, a phone. And I called the number, and I didn't recognize it was a 213 number. And so it was LA. And I called, and I got this really pleasant, lovely lady by the name of Jeannie, who's like, "Hi, I'm returning this page," and she's like, "Hello, this is Jeannie with the Star Trek Make-up department and Michael Westmore's office." And I'm like, right then, I just kind of froze, and I got a lump in my throat, and I was like, "Oh God." And she's like, "Are you available to come in this afternoon?" And I'm like, "No." And I was like, "Oh God." And she's like, "Hang on a second." And she put her hand over the mouthpiece, and she's mumbling something to Mike. And she gets back on, and she goes, "Are you available to come in tomorrow morning?" And I'm like, "Yes." I didn't even really think. I was just like, "Yes." and I'm like, "What do I need to bring?" And da 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 da. And anyway, so I got home, and I packed up everything I had. And I was sweating. I was like, I was miserable. I was like, and I go in, and I go through the gate, and and I'm trying to be cool, but inside I'm dying. I'm like ready to vomit, and we're on this stage, and I'm asking where the stage is, and I get there, and I set up, and luckily there's this guy that I know, and he's setting up next to me, and he's a wreck. He's scared and nervous, and I think this is his first time on Star Trek as well. And we were just doing Bajorans, and I mean, for me, who's already done prosthetic work prior to coming into Star Trek, I was like, okay, it's just simple. This is a really simple makeup. And so, and I watched this show, and I know what a Bajoran looks like. And so, yeah, it went really easy and smooth. And, I got more calls. Actually, my first day wasn't on Next Gen. It ended up being on DS9. And then, I would say I was on for a couple of weeks on DS9, moved back to LA, and then Next thing you know, I finally, got to go over on Star Trek. And I can't remember which was my first. I think it was the one with Worf's half brother or stepbrother. And he was trying to evacuate these aliens off a planet or something. And they had like this kind of scarab beetle looking nose thing, like lump on their nose. And
That was
so
the episode from season 7, Homeward, with Paul Sorvino.
okay, then let's see. Yeah, I think that no, it had to be something before that then. So I can't remember what episode it was. Oh gosh, but it was late season 6 then. And I can't remember. You would think I would remember, but it's been forever. So, it just, you end up bouncing back and forth on those shows, and it all becomes kind of a big blur. Kind of like when the Enterprise like warp drives, everything just kind of blurs.
That's a very good allegory.
And it just, after a while, it's like, okay, it's a Boolean. Oh, okay, it's it's a Cardassian. It's and it's like you just kind of get it, after a while. But,
Yeah, because at one point you were working on Deep Space Nine, Next Gen, and Generations, also, right?
Yes, yeah, that was crazy. Like I would be hired, for one show. Like I like the hire would be for either DS9 or Next Gen or Generations, and I would come in, and we would have spillover, and it's just pretty much like everyone was working, and it was one of those times. Also, there was other shows going on in LA. There was I believe Buffy was just started up, and there was, oh gosh, Babylon 5, I believe, was going, and there was, so everyone was working, and so there wasn't a lot of people to pull, from the union, so basically, I would be doing sideburns on Starfleet guys for Generations, and then doing a bunch of post-apocalyptic survivors for the Court of Q for Next Gen, and then I would like have like some big head alien to do for DS9, and I mean it would be like a flood of people coming in, plus trying to get things prepped and painted, for DS9 and getting stuff prepped for Generations. In fact, the Scar. Mike had me do the Scar material. We have nicknames for it like vines and stuff, but no one's really going to know what that is. It's basically a vinyl resin, but for Malcolm McDowell's Scar and everything. So I was kind of busy doing that, and then like. Mike came to me to run some stuff at home. I was actually running some pieces at home for like the Dead Romulan, and that was supposed to be a one-off. He was only supposed to shoot one day. He ended up shooting 2 days, and I can't remember that gentleman's name. The nicest guy. He sent me a thank you letter, and Mike a thank you letter, which was really unusual and wonderful. Every once in a while, you have an actor do that, and he was the sweetest guy. But the first day, did the makeup on him, and he sat around all day, and they never got to his scene. And then they wrapped him, and they're like, "You're back tomorrow," And so I had to come back the next day and do it all over again. And about 4 hours after the makeup was done, they shot him, and it was like boom, 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 and he was out of there. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, really?" I'm like, "Can I go home now?" No. I'm like, damn, but yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the sideburns, because I was watching another interview you did recently, and you talked about how sideburns are probably one of the things that you did the most, and surprisingly, they weren't actually cut into people's heads; they were all makeup.
Yeah, I mean, for some actors and stuff like that who could grow them, those like those were, the way they, had their hair cut and stuff. But for the majority, they were either lace pieces or they were hand laid, and only certain people, would get like handmade lace eyebrows, or not eyebrows, but sideburns, and the rest of them were laid. And I know for like deep background, I've heard stories that they were just penciled on, and I never did that. I mean, I can lay hair well, especially back then. I could do them very quickly. So
All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of what it is you would do as a makeup artist and what the process is to, especially on a Trek show, to make someone into an alien. And in this case, I want to actually use the example of Roxanne Dawson from, let's say, Unimatrix Zero when she was in Borg makeup. And not saying you worked on this character or didn't, but I just want to use this type of person as an example.
okay.
The reason being is because we talked to Michael Moore a few weeks back about prop making. He talked about the collaboration between departments to make things happen. And so I wanted to bring a Borg into this equation to see if there's any back and forth between departments, because the Borg has all these electronic pieces, while the Klingon has got all the ridges and all that kind of stuff. So
Right.
so let's start at the very beginning with this process. Like, does it start with the script? Is there an illustration or a concept given to you first? And where do you guys go from there?
Well, movie Borgs, the introduction of the movie Borgs, Mike had to come up with designs, and it was really very specific. It was like they have to be reminiscent of the original TV Borgs, but they have to be like super advanced. They have to be streamlined, and terrifying. They had to have an ominous look about them that would read on a big screen. So Mike was designing these, and he brought in Scott Wheeler, and then the electronics were done by Mike Westmore Jr. And the suits were actually farmed out to Todd Masters' shop, and so like this effect shop outside of Paramount actually had to cast everyone, and build the suits, and the suits were amazing. And then there was like a suit crew, and they were separate from the standard wardrobe we had on the film, and they were just involved with the electronics and the putting the suits on actors and maintaining them, because things would break, and it was rough, especially when Borgs had to take and do stunts and things. So it was totally a group effort to get a Borg, just put together and on screen. Kind of like the Jemadar. The Jemadar were wardrobe, makeup, and special effects collaboration, once again, because of that tube going into the neck that had to pump white.
Precious white.
Yeah, and it was like this. I forgot exactly how it was done, because I talked to our special effects guys about it, and it was just, I'm like, damn, that's really smart, because it looked like it was actually pumping stuff up, but it was basically just kind of bubbling the liquid up to a point, and that's as far as it went. And as far as any of that went, that had to be attached by the special effects people, because that was their rigging, and with wardrobe coming in and accommodating, so I mean those kind of makeups, I mean they were a big deal, because you had to maintain all of those different things, and it was like battery operated, and so like they had to be switched off in between scenes, and sometimes the tube would come out, and that's not good, so yeah, it was, different things would malfunction, and we all had to be, all hands on deck for it.
So can you kind of walk us through then what you do to make, let's say, again, a Klingon? I was using before Roxanne as a Borg, but let's say a Klingon or a Jem'Hadar. What's the process to get an actor from, looking like a normal everyday person you see on the street to getting them to look like a Klingon with Borg makeup or a Jem'Hadar soldier?
Well, I remember Mike handing over Martok to me. Like I got to establish Martok. During the Dominion Wars or whatever, somebody else took over because I was on something else. But like the first time you saw like Martok, that was me. And so we had the actor come in and get casted, and then his teeth casted, and prosthetics were built, and then hair pieces were picked out for the wig, and so that's the hair department, and then like the eyebrows and facial hair, I had to come up with, and then like the placement of the scar and kind of like develop the character, and so our actor would come in, and this was pretty much like any prosthetic kind of character. We had these black T-shirts with they looked like something from Flashdance, like the arms were cut off, the sleeves were cut off, and then the neck would usually be opened up a bit too, and so your actor wouldn't just be shirtless. They would come in and this black T-shirt and maybe part of the wardrobe on, and then we would do the forehead and nose and whatever other pieces were needed, and then they would go off and see hair, and hair would attach the wigs and stuff. Then they would come back to us after wardrobe for like the final stuff, like eyebrows and mustache. You'd have a Klingon who was all done, but they wouldn't have facial hair and eyebrows. Like it just, it was weird seeing like Klingons without the facial hair. But anyway, and that pretty much was, good for like, the asparagus head character. I don't even remember the name of that race of alien, but the guy would come in a black T-shirt, and the Jemadars, same thing. Cardassians, the Cardassians especially, like the T-shirts had to have like the neck area really widened because of those big neck appliances.
Now, did you also work on the Deep Space Nine episode Blood Oath?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's like one of my favorite episodes. It's got like all the original Klingons back in action. Can you tell us a little bit about working on that episode, and especially being around those original cast members and getting to do the makeup with them?
Well, it was a huge honor, and it was scary because, like, a couple of these actors, I guess, hadn't done anything in a while, and and they were just icons, and I remember being in the lab with Gil Mosco and Hank Eads and William Campbell, who, oh gosh, I can't, what was his name? Koloth? Oh gosh.
Oh yeah, there was Koloth, there's Kor, there's Kang, there's all sorts of crazy Klingon names of K's.
Yes, he was from Trouble with Tribbles, and he was there talking with us, and we were doing teeth casts and just kind of reminiscing and listening to his stories, and John Calicos was there, and then Michael and Sarah came in, and it was like, he just a booming personality. Like out of all three of them, he had like this really like strong presence, and like we're like John was just laid back, and William Campbell was funny. He was like that sweet funny uncle that you would like sit and listen to stories, and then Michael and Sarah comes in, with his booming voice, and it's like, yeah, it was really kind of, we were all kind of like taken back. It's like, oh God, he is a Klingon, and but yeah, it was a crazy episode with the albino. My buddy Mike Smithson designed that and applied it. We had to have a stunt double, and he went to Mike Westmore and said, I want Surprenant doing the stunt double. I want, and because, I feel Tom can duplicate what I'm doing. It's a very specific paint job that I'm doing. And then when Mike Westmore told me that, I was just like, wow, just blown away. I thought that was the nicest compliment, because I look up to Mike Smithson. He's probably one of the best artists in our industry, and his paint jobs are mind-blowingly good. His sculptures are mind-blowingly good. I mean, he's just a phenomenal artist, and to like have to replicate what he was doing and follow his lead was an honor, and it was scary. remember now, I was young. I was like one of the youngest people to get on Star Trek at that time. I'm sure there's younger people now since, but I mean, I was just in the union, and I just didn't want to screw up. I always had that in my head. It's like, don't screw up, don't screw up. This is a big deal, and also, just honoring Star Trek, and everything that's went before, and so I guess I built up a pressure for myself, but it helped me, I guess, do the best I could and turn out some really good makeups over the years.
Yeah, and that episode in particular is a real standout to me just because of all the Klingons and how unique a lot of them look in particular. But let's jump ahead now to the episode Distant Voices from Deep Space Nine, which you and the team you worked with on that one got the Emmy for.
Right.
And in particular, that was notable because it had a lot of age makeup on Alexander Siddig.
Yes.
Which you'd also do later again in The Visitor.
Yes.
Which you guys are, again, nominated for that one.
Yes.
So I guess Siddig is like the good luck charm for that. But talk to us about working with Alexander and how you guys age up a character.
It's funny, like I'm so used to just saying Siddig, but like yes, first of all, we'd already been working together and stuff like that, and he's probably one of the sweetest guys you'd also want to work with. Like pretty much all our actors were great. I don't think I ever felt like there was any like weird rift or anything. Everyone was amazing. It was like family. I worked with Marina Sirtis a couple of years ago, and we were talking about the family feel of the show and how hard it is for other shows. Like, a lot of them never get that family feel, and it was definitely like family on Trek. And but Alexander was amazing. He went through a lot, with that. It was a lot of work. Not just putting up with the prosthetics, but becoming old, mentally becoming old and being that character and not overdoing it, not being, like cheesy about it. And I think, he was so fluid. He made it work so well. I mean, if you had a bad acting performance, the makeup would have suffered, but yeah, it was a 3-person job. It was Camille Calvé and Scott Wheeler, and then Scott, he was working on Voyager at the time, so he ended up back on Voyager, and so some of the stuff Camille and I had to handle, and then with the next time we had to do age makeup, I got to kind of do it on my own, which was great, and once again, Alexander was just a wonderful person to have sitting in your chair for hours. I mean, great personality, great stories, just a beautiful human being. And yeah, it was an honor, and then, being nominated for an Emmy, like I was like blown away. I'm like, wow, this is crazy, and then I buggered off on a movie for a while. And then I left that film because I just, I kind of like butted heads with the first AD who was insulting and rude, and it just became ugly, and I was like, I don't need to be treated this way. Anyway, I'm not going to mention the film, but Rutger Hauer was in it, and Rutger and I had already worked together, as you know, and so anyway, I ended up coming back to Star Trek, and that's when found out it was nominated, and I was like, whoa, and like the whole Emmy thing, it was just like, what do I wear? It's like, and
it's a good problem to have.
And it's just odd because like I'm just out there. I'm a little different than like your average, like like company man, and I'm an artist. I came from that kind of background, and like kind of like a punk artist, and I hung out in the LA punk scene, and like a lot of the people I worked with back then were really straight-laced. Like it's funny now looking in the business that everyone with their piercings and tattoos and stuff. I'm like, okay, I remember getting like some shit talk about my ear piercings and my tattoos, back then. And I mean, I only had one visible tattoo at that time, and my ears were pierced and I had funky hair. And I mean, like seriously, some people, made some, asinine comments and stuff. And I'm like, I've heard them all my life. I don't really care, six and stone. But anyway, so I ended up getting this at the time. Once again, you have to remember the time this was. Like sarongs and like, man skirts, were really popular. And I found this great Donna Karan sarong and this really nice like Nehru collar coat to go with it. And I had a pair of biker boots and which you really couldn't see because of this sarong hanging down. And anyway, so I'm like fashion forward. I'm like doing something like, like from a Gautier show. And because it's a big deal. It's the Emmys, right? This one friend of mine who's since passed, Mark Besant, who I love dearly and respect with all my heart. This man, I mean, he goes back to like the second Count Yorga movie and like Mannix and like old television series and stuff. Anyway, Mark Besant said, Tom, you're not going to wear a dress, to the Emmys. And I'm like, it's not a dress, and I was explaining, he's like, he goes, you're not in Sri Lanka. And I'm like, I know, but it's like, this is the fashion right now. He's like, I will buy you a suit. It's like, it's like after work, let's go buy you a suit. And I'm like, no, I already bought this. I already spent money. And he's like, he's just looking at me like, why are you going to do this? And I'm like, because, we're makeup artists, we're fashion, and this and that. Anyway, so we show up and people are just kind of like shaking their heads. Other people are like, that's awesome, and some wardrobe people from other shows are like, that's beautiful. And I'm like, it's Donna Karan. And they're like, oh my God, and so that validated it. And anyway, so when they announced the winner, I kind of went blank. There was a big like blank spot from that and being on stage with Cyndi Lauper. And I'm like, oh my God. And who better to present our Emmy, than Cyndi Lauper and me in a sarong. And then we go backstage downstairs, get all the publicity photos, whatever, and then we head back up. And as we're walking through the auditorium as a group, we're elated. We're all smiles. And all of a sudden, I hear my name really loud. And this guy comes rushing me, grabs me literally off my feet and swings me around. And I'm like, who is this? And I look, and it's Paul Rubens. He's like, Tom, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, Paul, oh my God, I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. And everyone's like looking at me like he knows Pee Wee Herman. And I'm like, we work together, and it was just, but yeah, it was like it was such a star-studded night. I mean, everybody, from like a lot of old comedy shows were there, presenting and there was a lot of, Rosemary Clooney was there. I was like, geez, it was really an awesome experience. And I was beside myself. I mean, it was just the wildest, moment, like winning that Emmy. It was like, wow, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. It was a big, scary, wonderful experience.
That sounds like a great time. And now you have to show photos of that as well. So your homework is to put up pictures of the Buffy crew jackets and now you in a sarong at the Emmys.
Oh God! Sadly, I think there's only one picture from the Hollywood Reporter of that, which is sad.
All right, I'm going to hunt that down then.
Yes.
Since you are part of the behind-the-scenes crew, you're privy to a lot of things that fans like myself don't ever get to see. And what I'm asking about is test makeups. And I'm kind of curious, you haven't worked on so many different species. Can you maybe describe any test makeups for certain aliens that we viewers might know that didn't quite make the cut to what we saw on TV?
Well, I mean, some of them before they were even tested were sculptures. And I just know that, oh gosh, like we would do like sculptures to kind of like come up with ideas, and they would get X'd, it was like, no, yes. and maybe elements of other things thrown in to get the final design. But I can't remember anything really super specific. You know what? Oh, now here's one. It was that Next Generation episode with the mummified crew of Riker's old ship that's like half phased in, like Philadelphia Experiment, half phased into an asteroid. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it was like, okay. So we did some tests and we had to take them over to Rick Berman's office. And it was weird, like going there with, Mike Westmore. I mean, he's the Michael Westmore. It's like, he's a big shot, it's like, he's, high roller. He's like the guy. And it's like, he's going to, he's going with us over to Rick Berman's office. And, you could tell that there was a distinct, different attitude, because he's now going to, the big shot guy. This is, Rick Berman, and we had to go and present, and he was just very mellow. He just sat there and he kind of looked at things, and he's like, okay, yeah, that's good, and it was like, okay, it was definitely one of those kind of situations. I know personally I don't remember like any specific things that were completely not used. Like I know that there were like some tests that I wasn't involved with, for like the Borg makeups and stuff, and they went through a lot of changes to get what they ended up being. Yeah, I can't think of any major thing that was like, no, we don't like that at all.
It's probably for the best. Otherwise, I think CBS will
Yeah.
come knocking on our door to break our thumbs. So,
Right.
Yeah. So, of all the different species of aliens that you worked on, what was your favorite makeup to do?
Well, I've always had a thing for Klingons, and I became Klingon guy. Back then, I spoke a little Klingon. I knew a lot more about the Klingon Empire. I knew about the ships. I mean, I still kind of sort of do, but not really. It just I one of my hobbies is putting together model ships, and I always loved the Klingon ships because they were beaten up. They weren't like all like pristine like the Enterprise. The Enterprise was like looked so Art Deco and perfect. I'm like, ugh. It's like X-wing fighters versus TIE fighters. It's like, yeah, give me a beaten up X-wing or a beaten up Millennium Falcon or a rusted out Slave One. But it's like that's the way I feel about like Klingon ships. They're just perfect. With their insignias and their the paint job of the bird, the bird wings of the bird of prey, and
Yep.
Just they're good, and they're mean looking. They're mean looking ships, and so I remember like some of the Klingon actors would kind of quiz me about the Klingon society and how what the Klingons their system and like their vehicles and like what station is which, and I used to know all that, but anyway, geek. Anyway,
I'm gonna ask a loaded question here. What do you think about the Klingon makeup on Discovery?
um, I think the makeup crew, is great. I mean, it's a great makeup crew, but it's just, I think that so much stuff gets over designed, and like. I'm okay with it, I guess, but this is going to sound really just not nice, but I don't see the functionality of things now. Like things are over designed, like their wardrobe, like their armor is so busy. It's like it's not Game of Thrones, kids. It's like, but like the makeups kind of remind you of some of the stuff that Barney Berman designed for the reboot of Star Trek. That you never saw because like that whole Klingon thing was cut. The JJ Star Trek, so the reboot, but they did all this Klingon stuff, and most of them had helmets on, and it was like when the Romulan guy ended up being captured by the Klingons or something. Anyway, you never see those makeups except like on the special edition Blu-ray or whatever. But they're more beastie looking, and like I think I come from the Gene Roddenberry school of Star Trek, and I really it's about it, Star Trek to me is about morality and stuff and like the commonality of things or whatever, and like the established stuff. And I think we veered a lot of it's kind of like really far away from it, just because we have the technology to like go above and beyond and go crazy with designs and whatever. But yeah, I'm giving you way too long of an explanation, but nah, just they're a bit beastie.
I pretty much agree with you with your statement on the approach to Klingons. I kind of agree with that, and it seems like as much as I do like them, it's also like they're kind of trying to show off what they can do more so than have that realism that kind of got with all the other series.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes things can be overdone just because you can now, and
Yeah.
it's like this was good, but let's throw another set of arms on something or whatever. It's and it's weird because like on Enterprise, I had kind of a Klingon issue there, and there was that one episode where you had the Klingon running, into like a grain silo or something. God, it's been years since I saw that episode, but it's like, okay, at that time, Klingons should have still, had their, Mongolian humanoid look, and everything. And with Trials and Tribulations, when we went back in time, and Worf had to disguise himself, it was like, yeah, there's, that whole unspoken Klingon thing. Why did Klingons just look, like like raiding Mongols or something? It's weird. So yeah.
So Thomas, what was the worst day you ever had working on Star Trek where things just didn't work right for you at all?
I have two.
Oh boy, this is good.
We were working really, really ridiculous hours. Like I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep, and I was just living on the other side of town. I was living in like Beverly Hills, West Hollywood border, and coming in at like 4 a.m. and working until 7 at night. 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. And as the week progressed, and anyway, I was sculpting upstairs, and I literally just fell asleep. I was sitting down, at, the counter with my sculpture, and my head just went down onto the counter. And then all of a sudden I hear this voice, and I realize it's my boss, and I snapped to attention, and like, oh God, I hope he didn't see me. And he's like, oh no, that's fine. You didn't need to get up. And I'm like, I thought for sure I was fired. I was like, and it's just, I don't know, I was that nervous, but like, because Mike wasn't like that. I mean, he wasn't like, you're fired, anyway, he was so wonderful. And he actually said, take one of those sound blankets underneath there and just kind of crawl underneath there and go to sleep. He's like, I've had to take naps too. And I'm like, no. He's like, no, it's fine. I'm like, I'll just go get myself a coffee, and I mean, I honestly, I felt so horrible about it because, this is a high profile show, and people, there are so many people who would, kill to be a part of this, and here I am falling asleep, in my sculpture. And the other time I was sick, like crazy sick. I had like, I don't know, I shouldn't have went into work, but I couldn't call off, and we were shooting on location off the 14 here in California, and it's very deserty, and it was like a mining facility. I guess all alien planets are mining facilities.
More or less. Unless they're filmed in Canada, then they're all forests.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's so true. But we're out there, and it's hot right now. I mean, it's probably 105 degrees outside, and it was like, I think it got up to like 102. Plus, I'm running a fever, and we're doing Cardassians, And what were the other aliens? Oh my gosh. I think it was just Cardassians, and then I can't remember all our main cast. I want to say Colin was there, maybe. Anyway,
Oh, is this the
but there was
episode
this
where Kira and O'Brien go to liberate a Bajoran camp or something?
um, gosh, I was delirious with fever.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, there was a big spaceship crashed into the side of this mine facility, like this mining area, right? They built this big ship, and when I was driving, I saw it, and I'm like, holy crap! If anyone's driving on the 14 and looks over, they're going to go off the road. It's like there's a freaking spaceship crashed into the side of the mountain here, and it looked. I mean, it was so real. It was like, whoa, and it wasn't CGI. It was a real physical vehicle, like crashed into the side. It was beautiful. It was amazing to see that, and creepy all at the same time. It's like, ooh, Roswell. But anyway, I just remember doing my couple makeups and trying to sit out the day, and I got 8 hours, and I'm like, I am so sick, and everyone's like, well, yeah, you are. You need to go home. So I finally got to go home, and just driving. I mean, I don't even know how I got home. It was, the great bird of the galaxy was smiling down on me. I mean, so yeah, that was probably one of those days. It's definitely not an easy day.
So, what was the most important lesson that you learned during all of your time working with Michael Westmore?
Gosh, there's so many, but like one thing in particular kind of comes to mind is, I asked him, how is it you can maintain such an even keel, like throughout all the crap that's going on, and like, it just, with the hours and this and that, and he goes, well, I learned a long time ago, don't bring work home with you, and don't bring home to work with you.
Good lesson.
And that's probably like one of the most beautiful things, and that can, like translate, across the board to any job.
Read a while back you had created your own special effects makeup line. Do you still run that business?
Yes. Thomas Surprenant Creations, and yeah, it's a prosthetic paint. It was used on Star Trek for a ton of characters over the years. It was around '89 when I first kind of started, formulating everything, and then over the years it's changed a bit and improved, and it just, people around the world have used it, and it was used on Lord of the Rings trilogy. It was used on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, like so much stuff that K&B has used. Some of the artists on The Grinch Who Stole Christmas used it. I mean, I used my product on, on my actor for The Grinch, but yeah, it's in schools and shops all over the world.
So, for folks who don't really understand the differences between paints, what makes the stuff that you produce better than other products?
Well, it's based off of the theory that Dick Smith came up with. It's a combination of acrylic paint and this product called Prosate. It's an acrylic adhesive, medical adhesive, and early on that's all we used back in the '80s, and it was Dick's formula. He used it on The Hunger, on David Bowie. It's got to be good, and so over the years of using it, I felt that it wasn't pigmented enough. It needed it would go kind of leathery, and like when you drug it from the prosthetic onto the skin, it would crinkle up and kind of like look funny on camera and in real life.
So it was more plasticky and less painty.
Right, and so it was, yeah, very filmy, and so I thought, well, what makes a better, like, professional makeup? Okay, like you've got your over-the-counter stuff that, is like super expensive, that has very little pigment. And then you have like moderately priced professional makeup like RCMA, which is highly pigmented and goes a long way and, has great coverage. And I'm like, pigment. How do we, up the pigment? And then I'm like, cosmetic pigment. Okay. So, I started messing around with that, different like surfactants and matting agents. And once again, I came from the film world, with my grandfather and back when he started, I mean, a lot of things that they had to mix from hand, like pigment into a solution, and all that knowledge kind of like flooded in, and I'm like, okay, this is the direction I need to go, and that's how I came up with my non-acrylic paint, prosthetic paint, and people still call it PAX, which was the Dick Smith product, or formula, I should say, that he came up with, but it's not. It's my formulation, and it's just it's one of those things, once again, coming from that 80s time, when you couldn't just go to a shop and buy stuff. You had to make stuff. You had to compound things, or go to one of these companies that supply urethanes and whatever, and say, hey, I need this compounded. RCMA, for instance, they're a makeup company that's been around for many, many, many years, and I'm friends with them. They're really good people. And years ago, here's a Fred Phillips story. When they were doing Star Trek: The Motion Picture, he went to Vincent Kehoe and had the Klingon colors made, and they're called ST1, ST2, and ST3. And over the years, LN1, which stands for Leonard Nimoy 1. So those are Star Trek colors that were made for films and television by this company RCMA, and so I that's kind of like what I came up with my line, was to come up with things that were specific, and that's once again going back to it wasn't available. You had to make it yourself.
And so for folks out there who are interested in doing makeup and want to get some of your stuff, how can they find it?
Effects Warehouse sells product. They also sell my blood kits, which are really, really good.
I was hoping there was more to that, because the way you just said blood, I was like, oh, okay, can I get some of your blood too?
Yes, I've got a blood kit with 3 different types of blood. One like regular venal, one arterial, which is oxidized, and one that's this special kind of thick, drying blood that turns into like a scab. It's great for dressing, like like clothing and wardrobe, and like bandages and people. You could take a black coarse stipple sponge and like leave scratches, like pick some of the this special thick blood up and scratch it across your arm or face, and it looks like a rug, a road burn or whatever. And
that is the coolest, grossest thing we've ever talked about in this podcast.
Cool. And 3 different types of gel blood that are great for doing like 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, 3-dimensional kind of wounds and stuff. Like you could do like quick gashes with like the arterial and the regular gel blood. Also the you can like work it into the hair to look like bullet wounds, or like wounds to the head. And it's so it's like you get 3 of each, like 3 different, you get like 3 liquid, 3 gel, and so you get 6, a variety of 6 in this kit. And then there's a shop called Mamie's, a beauty center. It's in Burbank. They sell my products. And then the new website, the new website, it's not up right now, but I can get back to you on that. So we will be doing direct orders and things, but everything's been rebranded, and we're still trying to finish rebranding everything.
All right, awesome. Well, yeah, I'll make sure that our audience knows about where to find those paints. And as we come towards the end of this interview here today, kind of want to reflect backwards on your origins in getting into this business, because you had a pretty unique road here. You didn't do the traditional road of going to like Stan Winston Academy to learn this kind of stuff, because it didn't really exist yet. So for anybody out there who wants to do makeup, special effects makeup or otherwise, what advice do you have for them to get into this business and be successful in it?
Find really good instructors who've been around, who can give you proper information. There's a lot of like flash information. Just because it looks cool doesn't mean that's accurate. Like there's a lot of YouTubers and things like that. I've been teaching since '89, and we'll probably next year be starting up on the East Coast doing some teaching. I do teach at Blanche McDonald, which I recommend as well. They're in Vancouver, British Columbia. Neil Gorton School is probably one of the finest schools, but you have to go to the UK for that. But I think one of the things is what I have been getting, like the feedback I get is like, I'll have students who are in a 7-week, 8-week course who want to do like a Grinch costume. I'm like, okay, you've never sculpted before. There's no way in hell that you're going to be able to do that in the allotted time. It's like you have to learn to crawl before you walk, before you run. And I don't want to see a half-assed job in your portfolio. It's like, it's like, once again, I go back to what I was told. It's like, learn things that you see every day, and it may not be, a big bloody vampire or a big monster of some sort, with, like teeth growing out of its face or something. I want to see something I see every day, like an old person or, a character makeup and stuff. So,
it's basically observing from life.
Yes. These are things that if you get it right, no one's going to know. But if you get it wrong, it's going to stand out. It's like, and stuff that's going to help you get in. Like, I know a lot of people want to be on set and be doing like, they want to be venial or something. And it's like, well, no, you have to work to get to that point, and you have to be really good. And it's, and that goes for like people who want to get into shops and stuff like that. It's like, I want to be lead sculptor. No, you're not going to get in being a lead sculptor right away. You're going to have to work your way up. Unless somebody is really willing to take a chance and you're that outstanding. But some of the stuff I also recommend is hair punching, learning how to punch hair, learning how to tie hair. To get really good at that, shops are constantly looking for people to punch hair or tie hair, because of all, the fake heads, like how many times on a lot of these shows, once again, Game of Thrones and stuff, where you have like dummy, bodies getting decapitated or set on fire or whatever. All that hair has to be punched in one at a time.
Wow.
It seems tedious and a lot of work, but it also will get you in the front door if you're good at it. Because there's only a handful of people doing that, and who, kind of made a name for themselves, with their speed and accuracy of doing it. So yeah, I recommend learning everything, just like what was recommended to me.
So, Thomas, last question today. What is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
That's a really good question.
It's the best thing I've asked all interview, apparently.
You get a free small drink and a small popcorn at your local cinema. No, that's not true. They really should, though. I mean, I waltz in there with an Emmy. I should get something, right? Anyway, best part of being part of the universe is Star Trek fans are freaking amazing. Probably the most kind, loving, like supportive group of people who really care. Like it's odd. Like, I'll meet like closet Star Trek fans who are in our industry, and like I'll be talking to somebody, and then when the crowd kind of like thins out and it's just me and that person talking, they're like, "You work on Star Trek?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then all of a sudden it goes into like dilithium crystals and like warp drive and stuff. And I'm like, okay. It's like, but yeah, like Star Trek, being part of the world is great because like there's so many wonderful people who care about Star Trek and Gene's vision for a better utopian future where money and greed isn't a thing, and people of all backgrounds get along and celebrate each other. And it's not too hard to imagine that. I mean, given a Philip K. Dick future or a Gene Roddenberry future, I'll take Gene Roddenberry's future any day.
Absolutely. And so for folks who want to see more of Thomas's work, of course, you can follow him on Instagram, which is his name, Thomas S. Surprenant. at IG. I'm going to have a link, of course, in the show notes so that this way you make sure you don't misspell that name that I'm currently butchering with my mouth. But yeah, it's pretty great because it's, basically food photos and photos of horrible, vicious, gory makeup. It's a real great contrast. I'm enjoying that. So, Thomas, yeah, thank you so much today for being so generous with your time, your knowledge. This has been really great, really a lot of great stories, and hopefully we'll have you back here another time to tell some more Star Trek tales.
Well, thank you so much because, it's really an honor. I mean, it just, I went into something that I really loved. I was just being asked to work on Star Trek was beyond a dream come true. I mean, I grew up with it. It was such a huge part of my life. And to actually be a part of, the actual show. And it just, and being asked to talk about it. It's amazing that, people, care. It's wonderful to know that you've done something that has affected people and hopefully in a positive way, like, Gene's vision once again. And you asking me, reaching out to me to talk about Trek, I'm grateful and very thankful.
Well, I'm grateful to you saying yes, because again, going back to what we said way at the beginning of this interview, that's the power of yes. I mean, you could have said no, but you said yes immediately. But, I'm very, very happy we got to do this and we got to connect. So, thank you for everything you did here today. And of course, as always, with all of our guests, thank you for your contributions to the Star Trek universe.
Thank you so much. Live long and prosper.
So that was our discussion with Thomas. If you'd like to buy some of the products we mentioned today, you can go ahead and visit fxwarehouse.com. And that's the letter F and the letter X, warehouse.com. We'll have links for that and a few other things we talked about today in the show notes. In the Deep Space Nine episode Distant Voices, Alexander Siddig said in an interview with Star Trek Monthly that this episode was a massive challenge for him as an actor, and had previously said that he needed to really prepare for it and become comfortable with the idea of being old. Michael Westmore explained the process behind his look once, saying they took a plaster cast of his face to sculpt the old age pieces for him, and when it came time to shoot the episode, it took the team about 4 hours each time to apply all of those elements. This also included aging his hands and neck in case they shot him from any angle that could expose those parts of him. While this episode received a lot of notoriety for the makeup work, this wasn't, of course, the first time at all that Star Trek employed age makeup in any of the episodes, and it certainly would not be the last. And that list includes episodes like The Next Generation's The Inner Light and All Good Things, Voyager's Before and After, and who could forget the episode from the original series, The Deadly Years. And it's quite curious looking back on those episodes from the 60s to where we are today, just to see how much special effects makeup has really changed. Age makeup might not be the most interesting in a lot of ways compared to an alien, but it really is an art to make somebody realistically look like they're 60 years older than they actually are. And it's a real blast from the past to see how they handled that in 1966 versus what they did 30 years later in Deep Space Nine. Now, as for modern Trek, I'm still waiting for Star Trek Discovery to do some old age makeup stuff. We kind of had some similar type things in an episode from Season 2 with Captain Pike, but spoiler alert, not going to tell you guys much about that one. But these days in special effects makeup, it seems to be way bigger to actually de-age someone than to make them older. So who knows what the future holds for the evolution of aging makeup. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold. Please make sure you follow us on social media to see all of our memes and daily guest updates. And who knows what else, because you never know what pops up on our pages. All you have to do is look for Trek Untold on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you and hear what you think about this week's episode. If you'd like to support this podcast, check out patreon.com/TrekUntold to learn how you can keep our ship operating at full power. You can also check out some of our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold. That's TEE spring.com. That includes shirts, stickers, mugs, phone cases, and a whole lot more. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this show and give us a review and rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. If you enjoy what we do here every week on this show, please give us a 5-star rating and review. It's the best way to make new listeners discover this podcast and help us grow. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. If you'd like to send us some feedback, suggest a guest, would like to be booked on the show, or are interested in sponsoring us, email me at trekuntold@gmail.com. Once again, this has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.